it's me, Star O'Hara from Dispatches from Dystopia and Extremists Being Awesome. I have been thinking a lot about this topic, so I thought that I would record a little video about laziness. What is it, where it comes from, and what to do about it. And I actually am recording this for a longer project that I'm working on, but I think I'm just going to throw it up on the Substack because I think it's really valuable. So first, what is laziness? It might not be what you think. We often, I feel like, give ourselves a really large amount of crap in life for not being able to bring ourselves to do the work on something that either isn't something we really want or even need to do, or it isn't yet ripe for production. We're just not ready. It hasn't gestated long enough, maybe a creative project or something like that. And I don't think that's true laziness. I think this is what I would call should laziness. If you don't want to do it and it's not something you need to do, then what motivator could you possibly have for doing it? Usually it's either that other people expect you to do it, or society expects you to do it, or it's something that your boss or your family expects you to do, which could fall into the category of need, or it might not, because sometimes people expect you to do things that really aren't necessary. And maybe you need to have a conversation with them about it. Or another thing that can happen is that part of you're in conflict with yourself about whether you want to do it. Part of you says, yes, I totally want to do this, while another part says, it sounds like too much work, or it'll only fail, or I'm going to suck at it, or whatever. So that borders on true laziness, but it doesn't quite encompass it, I don't think. I think true laziness is this place we sometimes reach where we can't even put forth an effort, even if it's, on something that we want and or need to do. This can be due to a lot of underlying causes like depression, or a tendency to want to escape from life because it's too stressful or we're too overwhelmed, or possibly an overdependence on others for our survival because we haven't worked up the confidence yet. This happens a lot with young adults. We haven't worked up the confidence yet to go for our dreams or whatever, or take care of ourselves. Maybe we never learned the skills. So there's two key points I want to mention about true laziness. One is it's characterized by escape a lot of times, meaning you're using distraction activities to escape from reality. And another point is it's not restful. So when we think of laziness, oh, you're just laying around doing nothing, you should be well rested, right? Well, no. True laziness is not restful. So if you feel rested after taking a day off or sleeping in late, if you feel rested and ready to take on your next task after doing that, that was relaxation. That wasn't laziness. So some people feel that we shouldn't use the term lazy to describe this inability or unwillingness to do life, because it stigmatizes real mental health issues like depression, ADHD, or executive dysfunction. And when you stigmatize the condition, you may actually cause the person struggling with it to feel that it's unchangeable or that they have no value. And people who struggle with these issues often do that to themselves. They negatively reinforce their inability to get things done because they keep calling themselves lazy. They believe it, and it's a self-repeating cycle. But so it's demotivating, and I get that, but I have a little bit of a different take on it. So when, for instance, parents or teachers tell children who fail to meet expectations that they're just lazy, I would agree that this is often stigmatizing a real struggle, where when what you should be doing is finding out the root cause of why the kid is struggling and helping the child to address it. It could be that the expectations that are placed on the child are unrealistic, for their drive or their constitution or their learning style or whatever. Then the child learns, if you don't do that, if instead you just call him lazy, then what the child learns is that he's lazy and he can't manage life the way that normal people can. And this mistaken belief might stay with him through adulthood. It often does. It is very demotivating. But at the same time, there's also a risk to pathologizing laziness. And that's where we get ourselves a diagnosis like ADHD or executive dysfunction. And this now becomes our demotivating crutch. I'm not lazy, I have a condition. It can become an excuse not to strive, an excuse to be unduly dependent on others. So we should be wary of both these treatments of laziness, like stigmatization on the one hand and pathologizing on the other hand. So here's my take as an individual who has struggled with ADHD, executive dysfunction, anxiety, etc. I think the term laziness in and of itself is perfectly fine. We know what it means. It's a state of experience that exists. We've all experienced it at some point in our lives. We've all observed it in others. And so I see no reason to dispense with the term. But it presents as a symptom sometimes of the aforementioned conditions. And beyond that, it affects all of us sometimes. So pathologizing it into its own condition by calling it executive dysfunction or what have you only gets you so far. It's interesting to note that most of the suggested treatments and interventions for executive dysfunction are exactly the same advice you would give to a person to stop being lazy, the same steps. They're just perhaps modified a bit for like extreme distractibility. So it's a bit of a difference without a distinction. And the problem of stigmatization and demotivation comes in when we label the person as lazy. So try, and when we label ourselves as lazy, like this is just what you are, you know? So try this on for size. If you're having this experience, instead of calling yourself lazy and descending into this exaggeratedly harsh self-criticism, try saying, laziness is visiting me, or laziness is on me, or I'm experiencing laziness. And by the way, I got that trick from the Irish language, which I am studying. I have been for about 6 months. And it's cool because in most cases, when you talk about emotion in Irish, you don't say that you have the emotion, you say the emotion is on you. So instead of saying I'm sorry, you say sorrow is on me. That's the same way to say I'm sad. Instead of saying I'm sad, you say sorrow, sadness is on me. I think it's really cool because it makes clear that this isn't a permanent state or intrinsic trait. It's temporary. You wear sadness like a jacket and then you can take it off later, or it lights on you like a sparrow on your shoulder and then it flies away. Okay, so now that we recognize laziness as an experience that we might have, it's not intrinsic to us as individuals. Let's return to that point about laziness not being restful. Why is it that generally speaking, people who do more have more energy and people who do less are always tired? And by the way, there are exceptions to that rule and reasons for those exceptions. And I'm not going to hone in on those in this video. I'm just talking about averages. And I want to be really clear about this point that doing more, what I mean by that isn't necessarily it doesn't necessarily look like what we've been programmed by society to see as productive, because like there may be seasons in your life where you need to heal and the best thing you can do to be productive is rest and eat good food, or you need to contemplate and the best thing you can do during that period is sit by yourself and think. Maybe that doesn't look productive, it doesn't check off all the boxes, but it is productive. It's what you need to be doing at that moment and you're doing it. You're putting forth the effort. That's not laziness. But in general, people who do less have less energy because laziness isn't restful. Why isn't it? You're laying around, you're doing nothing or doing whatever you want to do. All of these activities are supposedly relaxing, like, you know, maybe you're watching your favorite shows, eating delicious junk food, playing video games, smoking weed, or whatever it is that you do when you feel that laziness is on you. Presumably you enjoy those things or you wouldn't be doing them, and none of them require a lot of exertion. So why aren't they restful? because laziness isn't a state of rest. Laziness is a state of contraction. And contraction requires a lot of exertion. It requires mental and emotional exertion. So there are three general states that you can be in as you go about your day-to-day human stuff. You can be in expansion or contraction or rest. So no matter how you're feeling emotionally or what activity you're applying yourself to, everything fits into one of these three states. So expansion is reaching out, giving of your talents and abilities, connecting with others, transacting with others in a mutually satisfying way, learning new skills, working on yourself, taking responsibility for your life problems within your locus of control, refining your beliefs, adapting your thinking to new data points, discovering who you are and what you're here to do. These are expansive activities, right? Or expansive states of mind. So expansion requires effort, but it feels almost effortless because all of you wants to do it or recognizes the need to do it. And therefore you commit with your whole self to the activity and it feels like ease. So I think a good way to describe this is effortless effort. You're putting in effort, you're doing the work, but it feels effortless because it feels right and you're committed. And contraction is where we resist the urge to expand. So expansion is like a human need. And often we resist that, right? We have a need for growth. We have a need for expansion. And sometimes we are scared of whatever's out there, or we're angry at the world for not handing us whatever we want on a silver platter. And this is like um, an unconscious state, but or belief or emotional state, but we're not maybe fully aware that we think that way, but some part of us does, or we wouldn't be in contraction. We have some contorted habitual emotion or belief that prevents us from the expansive work of life. And this results in this very tiresome, exhausting holding in, right? Holding in of yourself. So for a visual, you could imagine your body balled up in fetal position, every muscle tensed against this imagined fear or resentment toward living. And that is what your spirit is doing during an experience of laziness. It's contracting, holding everything in. So rest, that's the third state you can be in. True rest is where we need to take a break away from expansion to replenish our reserves of energy. And true rest, like expansion, is characterized by commitment. So the difference between busy work and true productivity or expansion is commitment. And likewise, the difference between true rest and laziness or contraction is commitment. If you're not committed to your period of rest because you're not because you're feeling like all this background guilt about all the things you're not doing, then it's not going to be as restful. So to recap, if your periods of activity feel effortless and your periods of rest feel restful, that's not laziness. And if you're doing all the restful activities but still feel tired, and if you're not dealing with a physical illness, that's important to note, it may be that you're experiencing laziness, which is contraction away from life in some form. Or you may be experiencing some kind of internal judgment that simply won't let you rest. So let's talk about that for just a second. We all sometimes experience this like guilt voice, this voice of internal judgment. It says things when you're working like, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it fast enough. Nobody's going to like it, etc. And then when you're supposed to be relaxing, it comes back and says things like, you shouldn't be laying around like this. You're so lazy. Get off your ass and do something, you know. So everybody has that voice. But you can question it. Is this the voice of society? Is it your parents or your mental image of your parents coming back from childhood through like 30 years of time to harass you? Or is it actually giving honest and true feedback? If it's not true feedback, then you can dispense right now with the idea that you're lazy and you can commit to your activity when you're active and commit to your rest during your periods of rest. But if the voice is giving true feedback, but it's just being mean about it, just saying it in a harsh way, then you want to remind yourself that you aren't intrinsically lazy. You're just having an experience of laziness. Then figure out ways to alchemize your energy from contraction to expansion. So this is possible. Even if you've been in contraction, if laziness has been visiting you for a very long time, even if you were never taught the skills you needed to have a disciplined lifestyle as a kid, and even if you have ADHD or executive dysfunction. So a few years ago, I took one of those tests for executive dysfunction, and I got a very high score. I'll just say there were 64 possible points, and I got almost all of them. But so yay, I succeeded in having executive dysfunction. So the way the scoring works is that the more points you have, the more or higher traits of executive dysfunction you're reporting. And most of the questions look like this. They're like, do you have trouble starting on a new task? And then you have choices, which are like always, almost always, sometimes, rarely, or never, right? So I just retook the test a couple days ago, and my score total was like half of what it was the first time. That doesn't mean that I no longer experience any of the traits of executive dysfunction. What it means is that I experience them less often. So most of my answers changed from always or often to sometimes or rarely. And how did I accomplish this feat? It was literally just by focusing on my locus of control, developing a few healthy habits one day at a time, and finding ways to fully commit to whatever I'm doing. So one trick you can use to get yourself further towards 100% commitment is to try and shift your motivation from stimulation to tangible reward. So the distraction activities we tend to immerse ourselves in when we're being visited by laziness are things we do out of a desire for stimulation. But the stimulation is just a simulation of reward. What we really want is reward. We want fulfillment. We want, all the good things that life has to offer. We want to accomplish our purpose, right? We want to engage with the world and accomplish our purpose. But what we're doing instead is simulating reward through these distraction activities. And what happens is they leave us even more tired and with all these undone tasks looming in the background, which is not relaxing at all. It's not restful and it's not rewarding. So the trick is to start asking yourself throughout your day with each activity what the reward is, right? Is it a fleeting reward of being temporarily stimulated with no progress and no lasting fulfillment? Or is it a lasting reward or something that builds into a lasting reward, like by increasing your ability to fully commit and building you into the person you want to be? But when you realize that laziness is on you, I want you to ask yourself these questions. 1, am I fully committed to what I'm doing right now? If not, why? 2, is there a way to bring forth that commitment, perhaps by tweaking the task, by realigning it mentally with my values and goals, or something like that? And 3, if not, if there's no way to bring forth that commitment from myself, then what is it about this task or project or situation that I can't get behind? Is it not right for me? Is it not the right time to do it? Am I confusing stimulation with reward? Am I overloading myself with tasks? Am I doing it in a way that doesn't adhere to my unique discipline style? If you've taken an honest, thorough look at your life, and if you've heard out the inner guilt voice that tells you that you're lazy, and you've considered whether your relaxation time feels really restful or it feels like a form of contraction, and you can tell in your body. You can literally tell in your body. But maybe I'll make a video on that some other time. If you've done all these things and you've come to the conclusion that you are, in fact, experiencing true laziness, then your task now is to find something that you can fully commit to. So it's just one thing to start with. And it doesn't have to be huge, it doesn't have to be dramatic. It could be something like not having a cup of coffee in the morning, or being present with your family during meal times, or finishing just one small project that's important to you, like revising your resume or clearing out your closet. That is just one thing that you could do in a day, and then pat yourself on the back and pick another one the next day. When you're first starting out at letting go of the experience of laziness, it can be useful to allow yourself to be okay with only getting one thing done for the day. If you're used to getting 0 things done every day or most days, then getting to the point where you get one thing done every day is pretty big. So I understand a lot of people are not at that point, but if you are, um, this is something you can do. Pick one object of commitment for the day and say to yourself, it's okay if I get nothing else done today except for my object of commitment. And be patient with yourself, because it does take time. If you're used to habitually being in a state of total contraction or almost total contraction almost all the time, then it does take time to decontract. You may be a little atrophied in some areas, but it's not a hopeless case. You can start stretching out. I don't like to use the muscle analogy, because it's like, when you're building muscles, you want to contract them, but you want to start stretching out uh, on a mental, emotional level in order to reach the point where you can be expansive in most of your daily activities and fully commit to your periods of rest. And those are all my thoughts on laziness. So thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got something out of it that will help you no matter what stage you're at in this whole productivity inner growth endeavor.